And we have another story that I don't know my heart is ready for.
Oh, it's been a long deep breath. I think we need to rethink this no wine thing.
I know.
There's a lot in my house to need to, right, like, pause. Like, so,
Come back, we were just like, we can do this.
I'm scared to know.
And I, like, Tiffany being back in the States, she recorded all of this by herself, you know, talking about her experience. And so when she sent me those videos, she was like, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I, of course, you know, time difference, you gotta love it, because it's like 4 a.m. and I'm texting her back like, Tiffany, I'm not strong enough to watch this video right now. I need a support system. And I have a support system here to, you know, to listen to you guys in group. And I was just like, oh, Tiff, I'm so sorry. I asked you to do this and be strong. And no, I can't be there to like be with you. Besides, you know, sending love 14 hours away, but at least I can push all of my love right next to me now. And
Yeah, because
It's like there are times when like I can talk about it and I don't cry at all, and it's like it's almost. It probably sounds to other people almost like I'm talking about the weather.
This was the first time that you, because I've heard your story about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you cried.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's because it doesn't mean much to you. It's.
I think trauma hits you different ways, you know, and it comes in waves. Sometimes the wave is bigger and it knocks you down, and sometimes the wave is a little bit smaller and a little bit more tolerable. I think each time is different, and you just never know how it's going to hit you. So, and I wish people understood that about trauma. Whatever your trauma is, that one day you could talk about it and you might
could say it without.
Yeah,
any-
recovery is not a straight line.
Right.
in anything.
Yeah.
It's like shaped like this.
Yeah. We're gonna.
But it's not that majestic. Recovery is not majestic.
No,
It is not like liturgical dance.
it's like a toddler or a drunk person. Like you map their steps.
Like the little toddler that ran in front of me down in the like in the set. So it's like where all of like the restaurants and stuff are. And it's, like, you know, she had just gotten her legs because she was like going in front of me, and the mom's like arms out, like trying to like maneuver.
It's like that. It's like that little Bambi moment where it's like, okay, you good?
Oh God!
You good?
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
And her butt is totally covered in dirt because, you know, that was taking the brunt of like the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Woo. All right.
Brace ourselves for round 3.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll start a little bit back. My husband and I got married we got together when we were 18. Got married not long after. Immediately, I put in our first duty station, and we're a little bit different. We immediately knew that family was a top priority for us. We wanted kids. We both had this conversation. We wanted kids, so we started trying. Nothing was working, and so I went to the doctor, and they diagnosed me with PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. That means that my ovaries can get cysts on them, and it causes a bunch of side effects, but one of the main ones is infertility or loss of pregnancy. And so I didn't know the loss of pregnancy part. I knew the infertility. So when I got pregnant in 2016, we were overjoyed, announced it immediately. I called my mom no more than I told my husband. Called everybody, announced it on Facebook, was elated. Went to the doctor, and everything was going good. At about, I think it was like 7 weeks, on our first year anniversary, I went to the bathroom and there was blood, and everything in me knew blood was bad. So I called I didn't call my husband, he was in the other room. Well, I did call him, whatever. I called
his attention.
Yeah, I got
You here?
I was like, we need to go to the hospital right now. And he was like, okay. Army hospitals. We went to the ER because it was a Saturday. And they put a freaking IV in me. And I was pissed. I was like, I'm bleeding. Like, you need to do something. And nothing. So I just sat there with a freaking IV in me, stressing.
But you were hydrated.
Oh yeah, I was hydrated. So they took me back, did a vaginal,
Vaginal?
yep,
That word.
that word.
We can use vaginal, I mean. Make it up new words. We're movers.
Ultrasound, and wouldn't tell me anything. She used the excuse of I'm legally not allowed to tell you, which I know it's technically not an excuse, but I looked at it as an excuse. Wouldn't let Floyd in the room. So they put me in a room and had me sit there for I think an hour and a half, just waiting. And I just sat there. And finally the doctor came in, he sat down and he was like, so you're bleeding and you lost the baby. And looked at me like he had just told me.
Can I just say I hate that phrasing, by the way? You lost the baby. Like, it's something that the mother does to
and I
make
did.
it happen. I fucking hate that phrasing.
Well, and like he first started out with like tiptoeing around the phrasing, and I just looked at him and I said, I had a miscarriage, right? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I had a miscarriage. And he was like, well, yeah, you lost the baby. And that's when he said that. And I was like, okay. And I just sat there and I cried. And I cried. And so we left. We had something planned for our anniversary, but we scrapped that immediately. Went and sat down in one of like the buffets of Pizza Hut. And I think I don't know if I ate, I can't remember. And I thought everything would be okay after that. But then I got pregnant again over here, and my first thought was, oh my God, I can't do this again. I can't go through this again. And so I walked on eggshells. I waited until I was like 8 weeks, I think, to tell you.
I think she like threatened my life to
I
make
said,
sure
don't
like
you dare tell anybody.
yeah.
I believe it.
So you signed a non-disclosure.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit.
But so I waited for a while to tell anybody, and I thought that when I got to 8 weeks, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna stop stressing because this is when I had the miscarriage. It didn't stop there. My entire pregnancy, I was walking on eggshells. No matter what I did, if I ate something, I was researching, will this harm the baby? If I picked up something I felt was just a little too heavy, I was researching how much can I pick up. I was so happy when he started kicking, because then I had a daily monitor of how he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I felt him kicking, I knew he was okay. And then I heard your story. And the night I was induced, he stopped moving. And I was in tears because I couldn't feel him anymore. So I went to the doctor. I went to the hospital almost immediately. I couldn't let it go. I needed to go. I needed them to tell me he was okay. And I got there, and she said, we need to induce you, like, right now. And so I'm sitting there going, oh my God, like, is it an emergency? Like, what's going on? It turns out, like, everything, somehow I had broke my water without breaking my water, so he was sitting in my amniotic sac with no liquid. He had like a small patch of liquid. I don't know how it happened. Sorry, I'm freezing.
Yeah, Yeah, these studios are always cold.
Like my teeth is chattering.
I couldn't tell if your lip was shaking because
I thought you had the like sad quiver.
I can't tell if that's what it is or if I'm just that
This
cold.
jacket's super warm, so plus I've been warming it up too.
yeah.
Okay. But so I was in labor for 23 hours, 23 and a half hours because he was born 30 minutes before I got induced and I started going to labor.
Thanks, Anna.
Yep. She left 30 minutes before I had him. And this woman drove an hour and a half, stayed with me all night, and the next morning she called needing a key from Kimberly. Kimberly was like, but just one more hour.
So you now get to hold this over Anna for the rest of our lives.
That scenario is a whole nother PTSD trigger that doesn't pertain to babies. But
Yeah. So, but and so everything was okay. So I thought, and I was like, the pregnancy's over. Like he's okay, but, and this is why I hate the hospital. I will be so happy that if I get pregnant again and I have another baby, that I won't be going to this hospital because they put the fear of God in me about SIDS. And I was so scared. Like he slept with me on my chest for the first 6 months of his life because I refused to put him in a bed by himself. I was so scared. And even still, like, we have a video monitor, so I sit there and I watch and I can make sure I can see his chest rising and falling. And then it goes even further than that. This world is so scary. I am scared every single day to, one, I'm honestly afraid to go back to the States because I know that babysitting is going to become a real possibility. And I don't believe anybody can take care of him like Floyd and I can. Because exactly, and
I tried to do a good job.
Not to say that no one else can do a good job, but it's never gonna be.
Yeah, it's never.
well,
the
and
same.
then you see like all the, and this is why I don't know if you guys, I got off Facebook because every time I got on Facebook, I would see these stories of these little babies passing away, and I would look at my son and I'd be like, oh my God, this can happen. And so I don't feel like that fear ever is going to stop. I thought it would stop at 8 weeks when I was pregnant, and it hasn't. And I had to go, for anybody who doesn't know, an MFLAC is Military Family and Life Counselors. I've had to go to them, I think twice since having my son. I had to really uncover a lot of things. It turns out I really, really deep down blamed myself for my miscarriage. I knew without a doubt it was my fault. And so without even realizing it in the back of my head, I said, okay, you failed that first baby. It is your fault. So you better make up for it with this baby. You better be the perfect mom. And if you mess up, it's all on you. If you get mad at him, shame on you. If you get a little bit too frustrated, shame on you. Like every time, if I started getting frustrated, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, I'd shut the door to the office because I didn't want anybody to see me losing a little bit of control, because I needed to be the perfect mom to him. And if I wasn't, I was the worst.
The best advice I've heard about parenting is a happy parent is better than a perfect parent.
Well, and when I talked to this military and to this MFLAT counselor, she was like, you can't hold yourself to that. Like, you have to take care of yourself, because otherwise you can't take care of him. If you need to set him down and let him cry for a few minutes so you can take a deep breath, that's okay. And I never felt like that because I had already failed one child. I had already messed up and it cost them their life. And so my son deserved everything from me.
And we've heard from some private messages that guilt that parents feel really weighs heavy. Some parents choose to they fall into that perfect parent trap, right? Or they'll say they don't want any children after losing a child. They won't even go down that road because for fear of duplicating that process.
The day I don't think you were there. I think Aeryn was the only one there. The day that I tripped and fell outside the office and he was strapped to my chest.
Oh, you're like, as soon as, because I think it was, there was some guy there, but it wasn't Floyd.
There was Mark.
Mark was there.
Mark. So as soon as Mark said that Aiden looked fine, I immediately was just like, okay, but what about Hannah?
Yeah.
Because Hannah does not look fine. Hannah does not look okay. I know Hannah's flipping out right now.
That was the day that your husband got his promotion.
Yeah, I was supposed to be leaving for Humphreys in a couple of hours for his promotion ceremony.
Because that's why you were wearing those shoes to begin with.
Yeah.
That was a crazy day.
I can't even look at those shoes anymore.
You should just burn them.
Or another thrift store.
Just burn them.
We could do a burning ceremony. I'm down for that.
Just label them your guilt and then just burn them.
Yeah,
Ceremony.
I like that. Yes.
Bonfire.
Yes.
So I'm gonna need you to start on those.
Yes, I
we're
like
gonna
that.
do that.
I like
For anybody
that.
who doesn't know though, I was super dressed up and I had my son strapped to my chest on one of those like little kangaroo pouches, as Hannah calls them.
That's what I call it.
And I stepped outside, my ankle rolled just a little bit wrong and I fell straight to the floor. And I still don't know if he hit the floor at all. I tried so hard. My knee hit, like every part of my body hit the ground. And I tried so hard to just shield him from
I
hitting.
bet if he touched that floor at all, it was
I don't-
probably
Because
a
he-
minuscule
Because he
fraction
went
of
like
how
this
much.
after Hannah was down.
We all work together. That's how we became friends. And
Well, no, you and I were friends first.
That's true. That's right. That is true. So we almost all work together. That's almost how we all became friends. And but in our building that we work together, we have some other offices, and one of the ladies that is in the office shares the building with us. Told me that the baby did not hit anything. That Hannah went into super mom mode and ensured that she cradled Aiden and that he was totally fine.
Well, I was a mess afterwards. I could barely talk to Aeryn. She was trying to ask me questions, and all I could do was nod or shake my head. But I think she stole your car.
And for they definitely
Yes. I forgot that I was the one that drove you.
Yeah, I don't want to say stole, but we go into get shit done mode. So we're in Korea. It's where we walk and scoot about everywhere.
Yeah.
We don't really do a lot of cars here. So one, for those that are like, well, why was she wearing those shoes in the first place? This is Korea. The roads, pavement, everything's freaking uneven. So like, I love my country, my motherland, but this is just not conducive to like flats even. So
It's not like they were stilettos, like they were like moderate wedges.
yes. So one, let's
Which
put that out
everyone
there.
who ever wears heels knows is not nearly as bad as real heels.
I walked in heels that. I can't even look at him. We were going to lunch, and I was walking, and then I was on the ground, and Hannah was looking down at me with, I think, Aiden wasn't even a month yet, Aiden is in the kangaroo pouch, and Hannah's looking down at me like, how are you on the ground? And I'm looking up like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And
I think
I
we
was
all
trying
have,
so hard not to laugh, and I finally got, are you okay?
Yeah. I think we all have a Korea pavement
Yeah.
story.
Or stairs.
Right. Yeah, or stairs.
Or
yeah.
both.
Yeah. So one, let's put that out there. So we just go into get shit done mode.
So I had decided that I was gonna go to the hospital. Aeryn did not want me to walk,
No.
and so she drove me and Aiden. Turns out, like, he was perfectly okay. He was just scared, and
I got
Then I
a
went
phone
to-
call as we are downstairs in the ER. Hannah fell. We are seeing the doctor. I will let you know. And I was just like,
what the fuck?
I'm not gonna go down to the ER, but I'm thinking about going down to the ER, Alicia. And Alicia's like, sit down, which is like my voice, my
you
RA
were
voice
going
of reason.
to a spouse's lunch because she was supposed to meet you.
Yeah, that's why I called you, because I was like, hey, I gotta go drive Hannah to this thing because this and this. And you were like, should I meet you guys? I was like, no, we're fine. I think Hannah's just really freaked out. And I think she needs to verify that he's okay. So I'll see you at the lunch in a little bit, but...
And I want to speak to fear a little bit because I know that fear still resonates with you.
Oh yeah.
And
I typed this entire paragraph in tears 2 nights ago.
and I can't say anything that's gonna remove the fear. Like, I can't, you know, my daughter is much older than my Aiden.
I didn't tell you. I will have to tell you something. I am now mama of Aiden.
Anyway,
he accidentally called her mama.
No, somebody asked if my child on my chest was.
Was it
So
Korean?
anyway, my Aiden, not your Aiden. So, my child is obviously much older than my Aiden. And you remember, like 2 weeks ago, when I was panicking in our group chat because she wanted to go somewhere, and I'm like,
She wanted to go somewhere alone.
but she didn't go by herself. Yeah, like legit freaking out, right?
Mhm.
And I wish I could say something to make it, like, to make the fear go away, but it doesn't. Like, as a parent, I think when you love that deeply, there's always going to be a fear that you're going to lose something, like lose your child. And you know, Jack and I were talking because he was telling me that from basic training, 7 of the people that he went to basic training with have committed suicide. And he's only been in the military 6 years. And he was like, and I asked him, I said, is there anything that would make you commit suicide? Is there anything? I want to know. And he's like, no, nothing. And I told him, I said, there's one thing. And I said, if that's something that happened to Kennedy, that is what would take me out. And I really wish I could tell you, like, that fear goes away, but it doesn't. You have to learn to manage it.
And I'm trying.
You have to build mechanisms to manage the fear. You have to have conversations like this so that you can be more rational about your fear. Sometimes your fears are validated, and sometimes those validated fears, your friends, those that love you, those that love Aiden, can say, like, hey, do X, Y, Z, because in that irrational fear, you would not think of that simple solution, you know?
Right.
So I think it's really important to have those conversations. There is one thing that I was really moved by that happened between you two that I think was so touching, and I really think if you are willing to share, I think it is, like, yeah, okay, that.
You want to tell me?
Okay. So Hannah McCormick kind of touched on it a little bit when introducing Tiff's story, and it's like the whole, like, what to say and what not to say, and like how to treat things like afterwards or when you find out about stuff or whatever. And that, those of us who've gone through it, we're not immune to that, like, how to say the right thing. Like, just because we've gone through it, we may not have gone through the exact same situation. Like, you've heard from the 3 stories already that, like, my experience is very different to Hannah's, and Hannah's experience is very different to Tiv's. Like, we don't all have the same experience, so, like, we don't all automatically know the exact right thing to say or the exact right thing to do. And so, you know, Hannah was aware of my, you know, experience and my background. And now granted, for me, that was in 2013, so it's been 6 years since then. But, you know, it's still a button, you know, that can get pushed. And, you know, she got pregnant and we worked together, so I saw her fairly often during her pregnancy. And thankfully, I was already at the point where, like, because for a while afterwards, like, I took off all of my family members off my Facebook in terms of, like, following them. Like, I was still friends with them, but I didn't follow any of them because I love my family, but they're kind of baby factories. I love you guys. I do. All your kids are beautiful and adorable, but you have a lot of them. And it was a time I didn't want to be seeing all these babies, all these pregnancies that were going so well and, like, you know, being so amazing. And so afterwards, when Hannah was starting to come back to work and starting to get back into the swing of things after her maternity leave, at one point when it was just the 2 of us in the room, well, it wasn't originally just the 2 of us in the room, like, we had, like, a meeting or something and everybody else was heading out, and she was like, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I kind of had this inkling that it was something about, like, pregnancy and babies and all this kind of stuff. And you basically asked me, like, if I was okay with Aiden being around and working around him and seeing him and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And just the fact that she thought to ask that, like, there was no just, oh, I'm going to come in with my baby and screw you if you don't like it. There was no, like, it's my baby, I get to do whatever I want with him. There was no, like, you know, if I need to go do something and I don't want to take him with me, you're the only person in the room, like, I'm going to tell you to hold, like, there's none of that. It was what are your boundaries? What are you okay with as someone who has experienced this? And so that it's just, it makes me so happy. I love it so much.
It's like once I knew your story, it's like you were constantly in my mind. When I was around and pregnant and when I had Aiden, you were always on my mind, and I always looked to your face first. And especially if Aiden did something that maybe it was just absolutely adorable, I always looked to your face to make sure you were okay. Because if I could see in your face that hit something, that hit a trigger, I would try to step out of the room and give you a second to breathe. And
I don't know why
I could just feel
Because people respecting other people's boundaries and other people's experiences is great and awesome, but not enough people do it.
And this is the only way anyone is going to grieve.
Yeah.
Like, you have the right to grieve, and you have the right to grieve just as much as Tim. Like, no one's loss is more painful. Everyone, like,
It all sucks.
Yes, yes.
Equally.
Yeah,
Like,
and oh yes, and that is a trigger. That's a trigger for me because, and if I can share this conversation,
Sure. I don't know what conversation.
Editing later.
Hannah and I are very close. She's the one who has to hear my verbal processing the most, and and in return, sometimes I hear her verbal processing. And she shared with me, like, she said, you know, I had a miscarriage and it was really hurtful and it haunts me daily, but I feel like what is mine compared to others who, like Aeryn, and I was like, no, we don't people, you judgy McJudgers, you don't get to minimize somebody's trauma. If somebody lost a baby at 7 weeks in utero versus lost a baby at 7 weeks after delivering, you don't get to say that she had a greater loss, that family had a greater loss than the person that lost the baby that was in utero. You don't get to do that. That's not okay. How dare you minimize the families who lost a baby still? That's not cool.
And I think it's interesting to point out that those of us who have experienced any kind of loss, we kind of police each other about it, because like I have heard you make statements that imply or directly outright say that yours is not as bad as mine, and I've literally jumped down your throat saying that is bullshit.
She did.
And like, you know, even when we were listening to
We'll take a picture.
even when we were like discussing and listening to Tiff's story, like there's a split second when like, and I used to think this like years and years and years ago all the time, like, oh well, you know, my experience wasn't as bad as, you know, if I had had her and then lost her later. But it's like I've realized and I've had to accept and fully digest that no, it all sucks equally. And no one is allowed to minimize that, even ourselves and even other people who have gone through that loss. Although I've literally never spoken to a single person who has had any kind of child loss minimize anyone else's loss. Like people who lost their kids as teenagers, people who lost their kids as adults and expected to die before their kids did. Like all the way down to like, you know, you and me, like none of us have ever minimized anyone else's loss. It's us doing it to ourselves and other people trying to do it to us.
And that's something that we really wanted to drive home, that it's not okay. Like, so one, don't do it to yourself, and two, don't you dare have the audacity to do it to somebody else. If you've experienced a loss or not, don't do that.
Thanks for tuning in to part 3 of our pregnancy and infant loss episode. Stay tuned tomorrow to see our final episode. Thanks, guys.